Are you ready to winterize your bass boat? Let's get it done. Stick around. Okay folks, I'm back. Next up, we are going to change the gear oil in the lower unit of our motor, and for that we are going to use 80W90 gear lube oil. And in order to get that in there, we're going to need a pump that goes into the bottle of oil, and we're going to attach this to the drain screw hole of the lower unit to get it in there. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So let's go. Okay, so in order to change the lower unit gear oil, and by the lower unit, we're talking about this section of our motor, you are going to find 3 screws. Way down at the bottom, right here, we're going to have our drain screw. And then a little further up top here, we have a drain screw down there. We're going to have the vent screw and the level screw. Or you can call them plugs or whatever, but they're screws and they screw into the housing of the lower unit here. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove the vent screw. And all you need for this is a flathead screwdriver. And there is your vent screw, and it's got a seal on it, and we're going to replace those seals as part of our maintenance. And so now that we have the vent hole opened, we're going to go down below and remove the drain plug, and that's going to allow the oil to drain out into our oil pan. So now we're going to go ahead and remove this drain screw. And when we do, the oil is going to drain into our pan. And here I was just about to talk about what you should look for when your lower unit oil comes out of the lower unit, which mainly is to see if it is discolored or watery, or if it has a milky appearance to it, which would indicate the presence of water in a place where no water should be. And sure enough, for the first time when I have changed lower unit gear oil, the oil came out and it was milky. So I've got quite a bit of concern with what my lower gear case oil looked like when it came out. And one of the things I would have told you in doing this portion of the project is that if when you drain your lower gear case oil from your lower unit, if it was milky, that you would have a problem. And for the first time ever, when I drained that oil from that lower unit, I had milky oil, which indicates that there is water in my lower unit, which indicates that there is a problem, either with a seal or with the water pump or with the impeller, or, you know, it could be a number of different things. And you can see that it's not totally milky, but it's got like milky swirls in it. But regardless, I have a problem based on the color of the oil that came out of my lower unit. And so now I'm going to have to kind of reassess my project here. And, you know, my boat is a 2021, so I've never changed the impeller, or, you know, I've never gotten a water pump kit. So I'm going to have to do that. And so I'm not going to finish the replacing the gear case oil, because what I'm going to have to do is remove the lower unit from the motor and see what the problem is inside there. So what I'm going to do is stop this portion of the project, because I'm going to remove that lower unit and do some further inspection and, you know, consult some buddies of mine who are a little bit more knowledgeable in this area than I am, and see what the problem is, and then we'll have to revisit it and come back to it. So we're not going to finish the replacing the lower unit oil. However, I have done a video in the past on that particular project. So I'm going to give you that link here, and it'll be in the description in the video below. And, you know, so if you want to take a look at what it looks like when you do that and everything goes correctly, then you can go ahead and watch that video. But otherwise, we're going to stop that portion of the project here, and we're going to move on to the next thing as part of our winterization video. But I mean, bad luck for me, good luck for you, you know, in the sense that if you're watching this and you're wondering what to look out for when you do something like this, that's what you want to look out for. That oil did not look like it's supposed to look when it comes out of the lower unit. It had a milky coloring swirling in it, which tells me there is water in there, and you're not supposed to have water in there. And that means water's getting in there. Not good. So let's move on to our next portion of our winterization project, while I have a mild heart attack about taking off my lower unit and buying myself a water pump kit. So the next thing I would be doing after I replaced my lower unit oil would be to remove the prop and inspect the prop and the spline from the prop shaft, make sure everything's good there, and to grease that. And so I'll show you how to go ahead and remove your prop. So the first thing is that on your prop nut, you'll have this clip here. And on two sides of the clip are little flanges that bend up to secure it. And you're going to go ahead and bend those flanges down. And I'm just using a flathead screwdriver to do that. And I'm going to tap it with a hammer. Just to get those tabs to go down. And so you can see there that I took those tabs and I moved those down to the side, and now I'm going to remove the prop nut. And the prop nut should be a 15/16 nut. I'll double check that. Yeah. 15/16 on the socket. And so you're going to want to use a piece of wood in here to give your prop some stability, so you can loosen that nut. If you don't put a piece of wood in there to kind of stabilize it, it'll just turn on you. And so you have your prop nut, and you have your prop nut clip, and you can see the two tabs on it there. The two tabs go up against the nut, and the two forked ends there go on the nubs right here. And once you have those removed, you can pull that prop off, and you have your prop removed. And then you can take your prop washer off here, like so. And I can see that I have some foreign objects in here, whether it's fishing line or vegetation or what. Looks like braided fishing line. So Want to remove all of that. Looks like a mixture of vegetation and braided fishing line. And so my prop is in pretty good condition, although it was a little difficult to get off the shaft, and it really shouldn't be, to get off the splines. You'll see that your prop has the splines in there, and those mate with your prop shaft here, and that should just go on and off, and I had a little bit difficult time lifting that off there. So what I would typically do during my annual maintenance is get a new prop kit with all the components for it and the nut and the clip, and grease this with marine grease, and go ahead and put that on and make sure everything fits nicely, and put a new prop on. But I'm not going to bother doing that now, because as part of trying to solve my water in my lower unit problem, I'm going to remove my lower unit, so I'm just going to keep the prop assembly off it for the time being. But typically what I would do is just clean this up, grease it, put it back together with a new prop kit, and go into my next season with a brand new prop kit. Another thing is greasing your Zerk fittings on your motor. You have the Zerk fitting right here that you can pump grease into, and the old grease, the fresh grease will go in and pump the old grease out the top here, and you'll be able to put fresh grease in there. And there's also a Zerk fitting for the steering linkage, and the Zerk fitting is right there in the front. Let me see if I can get the camera around there. Grease fitting for the steering linkage is right here. And so I grease that every year with marine grease and a grease gun. Get on there, pump it through till the bad grease is coming out, and the old dirty grease is coming out the sides. So now another thing I do from part of my maintenance is I remove this collar here, and I grease this steering linkage arm, clean off any debris there or corrosion that gets inside. And I'm going to take marine grease and grease this linkage. And then as you turn the steering wheel, it will distribute that grease throughout. And then once I have that grease, I go ahead and replace that collar. So next up in our winterization annual maintenance project would be the batteries. Now, I had my batteries out previously because I had already gotten into that, and I actually just bought a new battery because I needed a new battery. So I have my new battery up on the deck, and I just have that connected here so I can trim the motor up and down during this project. But it's important to take a look at your batteries, and you could argue it's a good idea to take your batteries out for the winter or leave them in. I mean, batteries are batteries. You don't take your battery out of your car in the winter, you leave it in. But, does it hurt to remove your batteries and put them in your basement or your barn or your garage for the winter? Certainly not. You can take them out, make sure you take a look at the terminals and make sure there's no corrosion on them, clean up your batteries, and, keep them out. And that's typically what I do. I run on 2 batteries. I run on a Marine 27 class battery for my cranking battery and my house battery, and for all the house electronics on the boat and whatnot. And I use a lithium battery to run my trolling motor. Now, I would run all lithiums because I love the fact that they're so much lighter than regular batteries. But As far as I know, unless it has changed, Mercury does not recommend or condone the use of lithium batteries for their motors. They say it causes electrical problems. And, you know, I'm going to check back with them on that to see if that's still the case. But last I checked, that was the case, so I don't use the lithium battery to run my main motor. So I only have 2 batteries. So regardless of whether you have 2 batteries or 3 batteries on your boat, you know, it's a good idea to disconnect them, check the wires, inspect all the wires and the terminals on all the wires to make sure they're in good shape. You know, I recently had an incident where I had a problem with my battery charging, and I checked the leads coming from the onboard charger, my Noco Genius battery charger, and when I barely touched them and they snapped off. So they were clearly bad terminals, so I ended up, you know, replacing some terminals. So that's definitely a good idea to do as part of your annual maintenance, is to check all your battery wires, your leads, and just kind of go through them and make sure everything's looking good and not chafed. Because a lot of times what can happen is your wires can get, you know, caught in between batteries or under batteries or whatnot, and, you know, a wire or a lead of some sort could get chafed under there, or, you know, the coating on the wire be taken off a little bit, things like that. I mean, batteries are heavy, so you're flying around lakes and you're turning and stopping and accelerating and all that stuff. You know, your batteries are going to shift, and eventually that could cause some kind of issue with any of your wires. I have 6 sets of positive and negative wires that go to my 2 batteries, and I run 2 of them on the lithium battery, which is one to charge it and one to run my trolling motor. My trolling motor is dedicated to my lithium battery. And then on my house battery, I have the boat wires, the Talon, the charging wires for that, as well as my electronics, my Lowrance units. So, you know, I check all of those. I check the terminals on my batteries, make sure there's no corrosion on them or anything like that. I check the wires going back as far as I can. And, you know, I like to keep them in neat bundles, and I wire tie them. But one thing you want to make sure you don't do there is tie them too short so they're too taut. You know, so if you have a whole bunch of wire, like let's say you have a Minn Kota Talon like I do, it comes with a very long wire. So you necessarily have to wrap it up a little bit. But you don't want your wires to be too tight, because if there's no play in them and your batteries are shifting as you're boating, you know, you're out on lakes zipping around, you know, that's going to put undue pressure by tugging those. So when you make your your wire bundles nice and neat and you tie them up, if you're kind of OCD like that, like me, you want to make sure that you leave a certain amount of play in there, so when your batteries shift, it doesn't put undue pressure on those wires and, you know, do some damage in the process. So that's one thing you want to be cognizant of. But another thing that moving your batteries out of your boat does is it allows you to clean in here and inspect in here in your battery compartment. And so, you know, on this boat, my battery compartment also contains my gas tank, my battery charger, my Bilge pump is down there, one of my live well pumps is down there. So by taking the batteries out, it gives me access to get down in there and check everything and to clean everything nice and good. You know, a clean boat's a happy boat. You may not see it all the time and you may not look in there all the time, but it's definitely worth getting in your battery compartment and cleaning in there, keeping it nice and clean and nice and neat, and inspecting to see what you see. Because, you know, just by looking, you may see something that you need to tend to. So, as part of my annual maintenance, I remove my batteries and I take a look at everything inside here. And, you know, so you can see all my battery wires here. And I have them zip tied in a manner that makes them easily organizable for me. Even though it looks like quite a bird nest now, it's actually a very neat mess. And with those batteries out, I can inspect the battery trays. I can clean in here. I can take a look at my battery charger in there, make sure everything's good with that. And I'm going to inspect my plumbing and my hoses and my wires, and my fuel lines, and the fuel tank itself, and clean in here and just take a look and make sure everything is on the up and up. And then down below is my bilge pump, the red and black one down there, as well as if you have a live well pump. One of the live well pumps on this tracker boat is back under there, that orange and white one you see there, and that is the intake live well pump. And so that is part of our maintenance. We're going to go ahead and take the tops off of those, take the pumps out of the canisters, because one of the things you want to pay attention to is your plumbing during your winterization process, and your pumps, because if there are water in those pumps or lines and that freezes over the course of the winter, that's going to crack and either destroy your pump or possibly one of the plumbing fixtures in your boat, either a line or an elbow, or something like that. By and large, they're all plastic, so you get water in there that freezes, going to crack it, and in the spring you're going to have pump systems that do not work. So I'll tell you what I do for my live well system. Basically what I do is I remove the pumps from the canisters, and that's as simple as twisting them and lifting them out. So in order to get access back there, I'm going to remove this deck plate, and that gives me access to reach down to my live well pump here, and you're going to turn it counterclockwise just a little bit, like a quarter of a turn, not even, and that will allow you to remove your pump from the canister. So for winterization, what I do is I remove the pump from the canister, and I just lay that aside so it's not in there in the event that any water in there was to freeze. And you can run antifreeze or any number of like RV antifreeze, things like that, through there to help the lines. I haven't found that to be necessary. Just removing the pumps from the canisters for me has prevented any freezing, and I do make sure I get all the water out before winter anyway, but you just never know when there could be water in there. So next I will go down and do the same and take a bilge pump out. However, the bilge pump is just a little different than the live well pump in that there's a plastic tab on the side. So if you reach down there, and I believe it's a Johnson pump, and you try to turn it, you're not going to be able to turn it to pop it out. There's a little plastic tab on the side that's hooked on a little appendage, and you got to pull that plastic tab off that, then you can turn it and lift it out. And so here's my bilge pump, and so I'm going to leave that out of the canister as well. And so you can see that white component there, that white plastic component, is the canister that the orange pump goes inside. And you can see that red canister down there, and that's the bilge pump, where that goes. Now, I've heard some people suggest filling up your bilge with antifreeze or a mixture of antifreeze and then pumping it out until it discharges from your boat. But man, that would take an awful lot of antifreeze. It would take gallons to be able to reach the level where that pump is going to be able to suck it out, run it through it, and expel it from the boat. So I don't know that that's that effective of a method, but hey, you want to do that, God bless you. So I will clean in here, get everything nice and clean, inspect all the individual components for any signs of corrosion or breakage, and take care of everything individually. And you'll see that I have my pumps out down there, and I will just leave them there. And now if you wanted to go a step further, you could disconnect them completely. One of them, I believe, is on a clip, and the other one is hardwired, in which case you just have to cut the wires and then make new connections in the spring. But you can also do that as well. If you don't know much about your bilge pumps and your live well pumps, I did do a video earlier this year about understanding the plumbing and the pump systems on this particular boat. So I'll also link that video below so you can take a look at that if you want to learn a little bit more about the live well pumps and the bilge pumps that are on your boat. On this boat there's three. There's two live well pumps and a bilge pump. Now the second live well pump is the recirculation pump, and that is mounted underneath the live well itself. And the way you access that is through the middle seat, and there is a panel in here, and this panel is secured by screws on all four corners. So after removing those screws, you can then remove this panel, and you'll see the wiring to the bilge pump under there. And basically you have to reach underneath because that bilge pump is mounted underneath your live well, which is right there. And so you have to get way under there, kind of contort your body, and to be able to grab hold of that pump, turn it counterclockwise a little bit to loosen it up and pull that pump from the canister. Okay, so now I have this pump out of its canister, and there was actually a little bit of water in there. And this is attached by an electrical clip, so I can just unclip this and remove this pump entirely, or I can just leave it there, you know, down on the bilge or in this compartment here for this seat. But at least it won't be in that canister, so if water is in there and it freezes and it expands, it will expand outward and just come out of the canister and not break either the housing or the pump itself. And another thing you can do is, if you have a live well, which I believe all Protein 175s have, TXWs, tournament editions, whatever, you're going to have a recirculation pump. So what you can do to further protect your system is to take some antifreeze, some RV type antifreeze or whatnot, and pour that into your live well. Now your recirculation pump works by taking the fluid in your live well and pumping it through the system and back into your live well. So if you put antifreeze in your live well and then activate the recirculation function, that will then pump that antifreeze as if it were water, which you normally do, through your system and get antifreeze in the system that way, and that will further help keep your live well system from freezing at all. And that's a simple thing to do. So you just pour it in. You don't have to fill it up. You can just pour a little bit in, enough to get pumped through. Put on a recirculation pump. Pump that antifreeze through the plumbing of the system, and you should be good to go. Now, another thing that I do as part of my annual maintenance is I remove my seats. And I take out the entire seating assembly here, which includes the passenger seat, the driver's seat, the middle seat cushion, and there's a panel that goes the whole length there behind them all. And I take all of those out, and the seats are in two sections. The bottom section is fastened to the pedestal that they are on, and the backs of the seats are fastened to that panel there, and that's how they are secured. And so I take out all those components and I clean back there. And if you haven't seen my video on seat removal and cleaning back there, it gets really nasty behind your seats and underneath your seats over the course of a fishing season. The first time I did it, I was blown away at how nasty it was under there. It was like totally gross. So it's a great piece of maintenance for you to do. It's a little bit tedious, but very easy, extremely easy. It's simply a matter of removing screws is all it is. You're removing the screws that secure the seat bottoms, that secure the seat backs, and that secure the panels in place. You take those all off, clean the heck out of them so they're nice and clean, and you give your seats a chance to dry, because the backs of them are wood, both your seat bottoms and your backs, are on a wood frame, even though most of it's vinyl. It's got a wood frame, and those will be soaked when you take them apart. You take those out, put them in your basement, put them in the driveway, in the sun, whatever. Gives them a chance to dry out, and you can clean your whole seat area. That's a real good piece of annual maintenance to do, in my opinion. Another thing I do is I remove my windshield. And your windshield on this boat is easy. It's just a series of 5 or 6 screws and grommets that are in there. And you take those screws out all the way around and you can pop your windshield off. And the reason that is useful is because all kinds of stuff gets down in there. And that's a place that, unless you got arms and wrists and hands like a Barbie doll, you cannot reach in there. So when you take off that windshield, it gives you an opportunity to clean down in there, get all that gunk out of there, all the stuff that gets in funny places during the fishing season. So I always take my windshield off, and I've already done that, taken it off and cleaned underneath there. And so there's another thing I do. Another good idea is to check all your fuses. Now, you are going to have some inline fuses in your battery compartment for various things there. But most of your fuses are going to be in your power bank, which is underneath here, underneath your driver's console panel. And you can see that I have the cover off there. There'll be a plastic cover on there. Good idea to take those fuses out, check them, make sure all your fuses are good. And I always carry a ton of backup fuses on my boat in the event that I need to replace them. So you may not know you have a blown fuse for some system on your boat. So it's always a good idea to pluck those out real quick and check them out. And if you have any blown ones, replace it. And, if you're not familiar with what a blown fuse looks like, there's an element inside the fuse, and that should be whole and unbroken. That should be intact. If your fuse is blown, if you hold that fuse up to some light, whether it's artificial light or natural light, hold it up to the sky or the sun or whatever, and you look through and you see that element that goes across the fuse is broken, that's a blown fuse. Or it could be a little bit more obvious than that, and it could actually, have what looks like it was, burning on it, and that'll tell you that fuse is blown. But, I always check my fuses at the end of the year, make sure there's good fuses in there. And, again, that's one of the backup things that I carry a lot of. I always have plenty of backup fuses on my boat to replace any fuse that blows at any time, so I don't have to deal with that, and it's not a horror show. Another thing I do is I treat a lot of my electrical connections with dielectric grease. And if you don't do that, you don't keep them clean and you don't put dielectric grease on them, and your boat sits for a few months or whatnot, you take it out in the spring, you may find that you go to plug in your trolling motor and it doesn't work. Or your navigation light or your anchor light, and you flip the switch and it doesn't work. You check the fuse, but the fuse is fine, but it doesn't work. Well, a lot of times is because of the corrosion that builds up on the electric terminals. So I always check the electric terminals in my anchor light port in the back of the boat, in my navigation light port in the front of the boat, as well as my trolling motor plug receptacle. I go in there and I clean it with whatever little brushes or picks I have. I get any corrosion off there. A lot of times you'll find that green corrosion build up there, and I put dielectric grease in there. You can get dielectric grease anywhere, little packets of it, little tubes of it. Put a little dielectric grease in there, and that'll protect it from the corrosion, and you won't go out for the first time in the spring and have your trolling motor not work for you, which has happened to me before. So taking some of your electric terminals and treating them with dielectric grease, cleaning any corrosion off them, goes a long way for winter storage, so everything works properly in the spring. Now, another thing you want to do as part of your winterizing process is to treat your fuel with a fuel stabilizer. You can get any type of fuel stabilizer, fuel treatment at any auto parts store or boating store. And what this does is treat your fuel and keeps it fresh, so to speak, while it's being stored over the winter. And it'll have instructions on it, how many ounces of this to put in for the gallons of fuel. But a good idea is to have at least 3/4 of a tank of fuel or a full tank of fuel, because having that almost full or full tank of fuel cuts down the airspace in there and thus cuts down any condensation buildup that would happen, which is detrimental to your fuel and your tank. So, before you put your boat away for the winter, put at least 3/4 of a tank of fuel in it or fill it up. Put the appropriate amount of a fuel stabilizer in there, and that should take care of your fuel system for winterization. Another thing I like to do is, while I have the motor cover off my motor, I like to get down in here and clean. If you take care of your boat, your motor stays pretty clean, but you do get junk in there, and all that is a matter of taking some shop rags with some kind of cleanser on it and tucking it down in there, and maybe pushing it down with a tool and getting it under there where your hands can't fit. And when you pull that out, you're going to see the dirt and the gunk and the stuff that it pulls out of there. And I gotta believe that the cleaner it is in there, the better that is for your engine. So that's one of the things I do as part of my winterization project, is I go in and I clean the inside of the engine compartment in here to the best of my ability. I mean, you're never going to get everywhere, and it's never going to be perfect, but it's one of those things that it can't hurt to do a cleaning. Fact. Next thing I want to talk about as part of winterization is critter protection. Now, if you have your boat inside, chances are you're not going to have critter problems. Although, hey, critters get in garages, so whatever, I don't know if you have that problem. I happen to have a cat the size of a mountain lion who kills everything in a 2-mile radius from my house. So, I have that benefit. I don't have a lot around here that survives my big cat, who, by the way, is named Big Cat. But you never know, I'm outside under this awning, and so I could always have critters. So let me show you what I do for critter protection over the winter. I take all my ports, I have my bilge port and my live well dump out port, and then you have your drain plug there. Obviously you can put your plug in your drain. And you have your intake ports down there, and then your overflow ports from your live well, and all of those have openings in them. And they may seem very small, but, let me tell you something. Critters can get in there. Where there's a will, there's a way. If they want to be warm and they sense it's warm in there, they can get in there. So what I do for winterization is I tape those up pretty good with painter's tape. I just tape them up so there's no access to get in there. And I tape up all the ones on the back, and then as I go up towards the front of the boat, I have a swing away tongue on this trailer, and I imagine most of you do. If you own this boat, you have that swing away tongue. So if you swing that tongue away, obviously there's an opening there with your wires in there, and that's actually a pretty big opening that critters could get in. But even if you don't open your tongue, you still have underneath where your coupler, where your ball hitch goes. And, that's an opening to get inside your trailer. Critter gets inside your trailer, builds a nest. He's going to eat some of your wiring, guaranteed. So what I do up front in my trailer, any openings I may have in my trailer, is I take steel wool pads or balls, and I stuff those in there so nobody gets in there. And, squirrels and chipmunks and mice, they can't chew through steel wool, so they will choose another place to go if they run into steel wool. So that's what I do at the front of my trailer. I tape up these small holes in the back, and I shove steel wool in the front of my trailer just to keep the critters out. And as far as the boat in general goes with critters, there's a lot of different things that people use that, may be effective for them. I don't know if what I do has any impact on it or works, but I've always done it, and I've never had a rodent in my boat. So what I do is I put dryer sheets in all the compartments. I take 2, 3, 4, 5 dryer sheets, and I spread them out in each compartment, in each hatch, all over the boat. I go through a half a box of dryer sheets loading it up, and I do that before I put my cover on. And I have never had a problem with critters on my boat building nests or eating my wiring or anything like that. So again, I don't know if it's because of those dryer sheets. I don't know if the dryer sheets make the situation better, and I don't know if they have absolutely zero impact on it. But I just heard that from somebody many years ago, and so when I got a boat, that's what I did. I've done it ever since, and I've never had a rodent critter on my boat that I know of, and I've certainly never had one do damage. So whether or not they work, I don't know. But I'm going to keep doing it because I haven't had a problem so far. So I use dryer sheets. I don't know what it is about dryer sheets, but they say that drives off critters. Who knew? And then, of course, I cover my boat for the winter. And now my boat came with a nice cover with, ratcheting straps that tighten it down nice. And I got a pole in the center so I can tent it up, and it's nice and taut and tight. It's probably not as good as having it wrapped, but it's worked perfectly fine for me. Being under an awning, having the cover on, using the dryer sheets the way that I do, I've never had a problem with critters getting in my boat. So that's what I do. You may want to do something different. You may be somebody who swears by having your boat wrapped. But, I'll tell you what, I wrapped my boat the first year, and then afterwards I said, I don't think I really need to do that. And then I didn't do that in the subsequent years, and I haven't had a problem. I just clean my boat good. I get everything out of it. I lay down those dryer sheets in all the different compartments. I put the cover on the boat. I keep it under the awning, and I haven't had a problem. So, if you keep your boat out in the open or in a field or in a grassy area, a big lawn or something, you may have a different problem. I'm out here on a cement pad next to my house, so maybe that in and of itself cuts down the likelihood of critters. That and Big Cat, but, I wouldn't mess with him either. But, so that's what I do for my winter storage. You may want to do something different. So far, so good for me. Another good annual item to take a look at is your trailer wheels. Checking the hub assemblies, the bearings, the grease, and making sure everything is working fine there. You don't have any noises or indications of grinding or indications of water in there or indications of grease flying out of it, because if grease is flying out of it, then there ain't no grease in it. So I don't have that problem this year because I just did a boat makeover. If you watched my boat makeover video, you saw that I stripped my boat and trailer down to the bone and redid everything. So I put entire new hub assemblies, bearings, grease on. So I don't have to worry about that this year. But it's always worth popping your tires off and checking your hubs and bearings and making sure everything is good there, especially if you're somebody like me, does a lot of highway travel to go fishing. You're always out on the road with your boat. You don't want that going on you. So always good to check that out and replace bearings or entire hub assemblies if need be. Now, one of the things I discovered this year that I think is like one of the best inventions ever is pre-assembled hub assemblies with the components in there, the bearings in there, the grease already in there. All you have to do is literally slide it on your spindle. The only thing you have to do is take out the cotter pin and the castle nut and washer, and then you can take that whole hub assembly, slide it on, put it in there, put the washer, replace the castle nut, replace the cotter pin, and you're good to go. And you've got a whole new bearing set and a whole new hub assembly. And I picked those up for I want to say $53 or something like that on eTrailer.com. And they come in their own little carrying case, so you can keep a backup set in your truck or whatever vehicle you have. So in the event that you have a problem on a highway where you blow a bearing or something, you don't have to have all kinds of tools to make this big gigantic mess, or have the know-how how to get inside that hub assembly and replace a bearing or a race or something like that. You can just take this fully assembled hub assembly, and all you got to do is take off the cotter pin, the washer, and the castle nut, slide the whole thing on, replace the washer, the nut, and the pin, and you're on the go again. What an awesome invention. I can't believe that I just discovered that last year. So, I was always somebody who took out the bearings and pressed the bearings back in and did all the greasing and, all that stuff. What a mess. You need tools. You need time. I really like those, so I thought I would share that with you in case you didn't know. I picked those up, and I have a backup set of hub assemblies and bearings in my truck at all times, just in case I have a problem. I can replace it in 10 minutes. So, good stuff there. Okay, folks, well, we're getting ready to wrap this up. I know that this is going to be a long video when I edit all this video footage down and, try to make a smooth video out of this. That being said, my aim was to provide you with the most thorough maintenance and winterization video that I could in one place so you can get everything that you need. So I hope I've achieved that, understanding that I'm sure I probably forgot something that I should put in there. So that being said, we're in my workshop. I have my lower unit removed. I took that off so we can deal with the water issue I have in there. I'm very glad that happened the way it did. I would much rather deal with that in my driveway and in my workshop than have some catastrophe happen had I not detected that there was water in my lower unit. So we have the lower unit dismantled, and I do believe I found the culprit that allowed water to go through and down into that lower unit where water is not supposed to be. I have ordered my repair kit for that, which is part of a 300-hour service anyway, and I'm probably just about due for that. Now, sometimes it can be hard to know how many hours you have on your engine. And if I'm not mistaken, there is no way on these Mercuries to know how many hours you have on it unless you've installed an aftermarket meter for your engine that will tell you how many hours on it. The only option is to bring it to a tracker dealer who can hook it up to a diagnostic and tell you how many hours are on it. So after this happened, I calculated in my head based on the last time I knew how many hours were on my engine, and I'm probably overdue for a 300-hour service at this point. So, I'm kind of glad, as much of a pain in the butt as it was, I'm kind of glad that I found that water in my lower unit, and I'm going to replace all the necessary parts for that. We'll put that back together, and hopefully we'll be good to go. So before we wrap things up, there's just a couple more things I want to talk to you about for annual maintenance that really are kind of important. They're things you don't usually think about, but, they can be important. Now, I'm somebody who travels a lot, as I've mentioned. I have traveled to Florida from Massachusetts 3 or 4 times, 4 or 5 times. I have driven to Guntersville in Alabama. I have driven to Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia on 3 or 4 occasions. I have fished Lake Chickamauga in Tennessee, and I made that trip probably 3 times. North Carolina. I've been to several long trips, and I put a lot of miles on. And when you travel and fish an awful lot, things happen. Things break. It is just a fact, especially on the highway. So that being said, one of the things I wanted to mention about maintenance is your spare tire on your trailer. When you do your annual maintenance, that is a good time to check your spare tire. Make sure the tire is inflated to the proper level, it's in good shape, and that it's going to work when you need it. But perhaps more importantly, that spare tire ain't going to do you no good if you can't get it off the bracket that it's on. And the reason I say that is because on this tracker boat, and probably I would guess most boats, that spare tire is attached to a bracket of some sort by means of a U-bolt or some other bolting mechanism. And now that is underneath. That is getting everything picked up all year long, off the roads, off the highway, the weather, the rain, the snow, the salt, you name it. And those nuts are going to be cemented when you need to get at them. And I have run into that before where it took me everything I had just to get the nuts off the U-bolt to be able to extract the spare tire from the bracket in order to use it. And nothing aggravates me more than when something that should be really simple ends up taking hours or becomes this long drama that you have to deal with. So, as part of my annual maintenance, I always exercise the nuts and bolts that are involved, so when it comes time to use them, I know I can get them off. So I take these off, I hit the threads with a wire brush, I put anti-seize on the bolts, and I put them back on, make sure that when I need that, I'm going to be able to get at it. And I can tell you that from personal experience, because I'm telling you, there's just about nothing that hasn't happened to me at some point in time on my boat or my trailer that has caused me aggravation. And that has made me into a Boy Scout in the respect that I am prepared for everything now. I have backups of everything in my truck or on my boat. I have backup props and prop kits. I have backup trolling motor props and wing nut and shear pin and washer kits. I have backup fuses. There's pretty much not anything on my boat that has the potential of breaking and ruining my day or my weekend or my trip or my tournament that I don't have a backup of. I have backup live well pumps. I have backup bilge pump. Anything that's going to break and ruin my day, I have a backup, and I keep it in my truck or on my boat if it's something that I could fix on my boat on the water. So if I can fix it on the water, I keep it in a box on my boat. And if it's something that I would need to take my boat out of the water to fix anyway, I keep it in my truck box. So one of the other things regarding that flat tire that's going to happen to you in the middle of the night, in a rainstorm, or at some other inconvenient time or location that's going to make it a disaster for you, you should always be prepared to be able to change that flat. And the reason why I'm making a big deal of it, it may seem, is because you're not always prepared for that. For instance, the lug wrench you have in your truck for your truck or your car or whatever may not suffice to be able to remove the lug nuts on your trailer. So you need to make sure you have the right size. And so I have a go bag that I made specifically for changing a flat on my trailer and or changing a hub assembly should I blow a bearing on the highway somewhere. And so I mentioned earlier those pre-assembled hub assemblies that come in the carrying case, and those are just awesome. But still, you're going to need the right tools to be able to take care of that. And so I made a bag that has everything in it that I need to change a hub assembly, which includes the bearings, or a flat tire. So I'm going to show you what I carry in my bag if that helps you make your own go bag. So when you need to change a flat, you're going to need to get at the nuts that bolt your spare tire on, and so you're going to have the right size socket. Now I typically carry a pretty extensive socket set in my truck, but what if I forgot it? What if I forgot it at home? So what I have in my go bag is a ratchet, a socket to get the nuts off the U-bolt, and you got to make sure that is a deep socket, because when these nuts are fastened, they're way down here when they're holding on your spare tire. So if you just have a regular depth socket, you're not going to be able to reach down to the nut because the threaded post of this bolt is going to be up too high. So you're going to need a deep socket that can reach down to get that out of there. So I have the ratchet, I have the deep socket to get at the U-bolt, and I have the correct size socket to be able to remove my lug nuts. I also carry a flathead screwdriver because you're going to have some type of center cap. You may have this type if you have the stock one from Tracker, and they have a little slot in there. You stick a little screwdriver or something in there and pop that off, and that's the first thing you got to do is be able to take this center cap off. So something so simple can prove to be a pain in the butt if you don't have something as simple as a screwdriver to pop that off. I also have a ball peen hammer and needle nose pliers. And the reason I carry those in my go bag is because in order to get at your castle nut, to be able to remove the castle nut, to then be able to remove the hub assembly and replace it with another pre-assembled one, you have to take out a cotter pin. That cotter pin you may be able to move by hand or you may not. So needle nose pliers allow you to straighten out the cotter pin, and then you grab it on one end, and then I have a nice ball peen hammer here to tap that out and make that an easy job to remove the cotter pin. But before you even get to that, your hub assembly is likely going to have a center cap on it. And let me tell you something, when you haven't been in there in a long time, you are not going to be able to remove that by hand unless you've got super strong hands or you're lucky or something. And in order to remove that center cap to get at the cotter pin and the castle nut and the washer, you have to remove that cap. And the best thing to do that on the fly is a ball peen hammer, and you just gently tap around that center cap, and that'll eventually come out to a point where you can pull it off with your hand. But there's been times I've had to get at those and change those. I couldn't get that thing off for the life of me, and something that should take 30 seconds took me an hour to do, and that just drives me batty. Ball peen hammer, must have. I also carry an old beat up set of channel locks, because when you go to remove that castle nut, a regular size wrench isn't going to fit that castle nut. You're going to need some channel locks like these to be able to grab on that castle nut, assuming you can't do it by hand, which most of the time you're not going to be able to. Crack that castle nut open. Now you can you've removed the cotter pin. Now you can take off the castle nut, take off the washer. Now you can take off the bad hub assembly, put the new one on, then replace the washer, the castle nut, the cotter pin, and then the center cap on the hub. And then when you put it back together, you're good to go. If you don't have these simple tools on you, though, it makes a simple job a far sight more difficult. Another thing I carry is a breaker bar, which is nothing more than a piece of pipe that I got at a plumbing store. And, the ratchet I carry is pretty beefy, so it's going to be able to handle some pressure. And when you go to take off those lug nuts, that's one of those things that, you may not be able to do. Or even the nuts on your U-bolt to get at your spare tire. So I always have a breaker bar that I can put over a wrench and get some leverage and really move that. Invaluable right there. So by making sure I do the annual maintenance and putting some anti-seize on my U-bolt, and by carrying a go bag that has everything I need in it to get that tire off and change it, and or get a hub assembly off and change it, I have learned from personal experience that that is worth its weight in gold. I also carry a hydraulic jack and jack stands in my truck at all times, because who the hell likes to use, a scissor jack that comes in your car or your truck? And, when it happens, you're always on some crazy terrain or something that's not necessarily sturdy. And, having a hydraulic jack that you feel a lot better putting your trailer or your truck up on, it's worth the effort, in my opinion. So part of my annual maintenance is I go through all of those items and make sure I have everything ready to go. So when I start fishing again, I am ready to deal with whatever unfortunate, unsavory incident befalls me. Annual maintenance time is also a good time to go over whatever you carry for emergencies. Flares. Most flares have expiration dates, so check your expiration dates on your flares. If you're getting close to that, replace your flares. You're required to carry flares, to be in compliance with regulations, so make sure that they work. Same thing with your fire extinguisher. That's one thing you're going to want to make sure that you remove from your boat. Don't leave out there in sub-zero temperatures over the winter. Check to make sure it's appropriately filled. Check to make sure it's not out of any expiration date. And if it is, go get yourself a new one so you're ready to go in the springtime. So I also use my annual maintenance time as a time to hit a checklist and go over all my emergency items that I need to carry on my boat or in my truck. I also carry a ton of batteries and fuses in my emergency box. I got AAA batteries, I got AA batteries. I have the circular type batteries, the lithium batteries there. I have a whole bunch of fuses, every size fuse that I need on my boat. I have a backup set of boat keys in my emergency box. And really anything else I can think of that I stuff in here. But, it's a good time to go through whatever you have for an emergency box. Make sure everything's good to go and you're ready to deal with an emergency. I also carry a toolbox on my boat. And again, from experience, I've learned that it's good to have certain things on your boat to deal with things that happen. So I go through my boat toolbox every year when I do my annual maintenance, and I make sure I have everything I need in here. And, it goes, some of the backup things I have, like I have a backup kill switch tether in there. You just never know when you're going to lose something or something's going to break that you need to be able to fish in a tournament or to just be able to fish at all. I carry basic tools in there, screwdrivers, ratchet, wrench, things of that nature. But one thing I wanted to share with you that I've learned to carry is, last year I had the unfortunate event of getting hooked in the face with a whopper plopper, which has a giant, thick, nasty hook right through my nose. Ruined my night of fishing because I had to go to the emergency room because I could not get that thing out of there. So, who knew that there was such thing as a miniature set of bolt cutters? So now I have this mini bolt cutter, so in the event that I have a hook in me or something, which is going to happen from time to time, unfortunately, now I have the ability to snap that sucker. I mean, those hooks and those whopper ploppers are some brutal hooks. My brother and I could not get that out. Now I carry bolt cutters in my toolbox. Another thing I carry that is going to seem weird is I carry a small hammer and a nail punch. Why do I carry that, you ask? Well, I was down in Tennessee once on Lake Chickamauga, and I ran into something, and I was humming along on my trolling motor, and it must have been a rock or whatever, and you hit things. Well, I hit this rock at an angle, and I was on, I was probably on 5. I was probably on, the 5th speed, going as fast as it could go, which is only a few miles an hour, but still, you hit a rock with that, it does some damage. I bent up it didn't work properly after I hit it, and I realized that I bent the shear pin that holds the prop on to the spindle on the trolling motor. Well, something that should take 5 minutes, not even. I always carry extra shear pins and wing nuts and washer kits for my trolling motor in the event that I need to change that. But that doesn't do you any good if you can't get the existing shear pin out. I bent the existing shear pin in such a fashion that I couldn't get it out. I mean, I had needle nose pliers on that thing, and I was putting all my weight on it, and I don't know if it was just the stars were aligned and, it was like the perfect storm, but I couldn't get the old pin out because it was bent. Couldn't get it out. So after that incident, it took me a long time to get that out. I carry a nail punch that fits inside that little hole where the shear pin goes, and this little mini hammer. If that ever happens to me again, I'm going to be able to put this in there and knock that pin out, put the new pin in, and go on my way, and not have that suck an hour or two out of my fishing day wherever I am. So, you live and you learn. I now carry a nail punch and a mini hammer in my toolbox that is on my boat. I also carry backup cap lights. As you know, I do an awful lot of fishing at night. These tend to find their way into the water. So I carry backup cap lights, and I carry backup cap lights that have red and green. I was out on a fishing tournament once, and we were leaving before sunrise to get out where we needed to go, and lo and behold, my navigation light didn't want to work that day. So what I ended up doing was I took 2 cap lights that had capability of red and green. I put one on red and I put one on green, and I zip tied them to the post of my navigation light on the front of my boat, the light of which didn't work at the time. And I was able to tie those on there, so I had a red and green light on the front of my boat, so I was able to proceed out there. I would have hated for that to keep me out of that tournament and not be able to go out until after the sun came up. I would have lost, an hour or two of time getting to the location I needed to get to where I wanted to fish. So, again, you live and learn from experience. So I always carry 4 or 5 extra cap lights for when I drop them in the water, or for when I need an emergency navigation light. And so I hope that this video did you some service when it comes to maintenance and winterization of your boat. I fully believe that if I can do this, you can do this. Simple tools, a little bit of know-how, a little bit of understanding, a little bit of nomenclature, knowing what things are called and what they do and where they belong. And you get that understanding and you use some simple tools that almost everybody has already anyway, and you save yourself hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And you save yourself the aggravation of packing up your boat, bringing it to somebody else, waiting for them to fit you in their schedule, and then going back to pick up your boat. And, when you go back, writing them a big old check for it. So, if that's something you're interested in, I really truly hope that this video was a help to you in that regard. if you have any questions, by all means hit me up with the comment section, and if I know the answer, by all means I will provide the answer to you, and if I don't know the answer, I will try to get it for you. So thanks for being here, thanks for being a part of Chicken Thigh Fishing. We'll see you next time, and until then, stay fishing, my friends.